from Rhode Island is recognized for 5 minutes remote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Mr. Martin, in your testimony, you noted that the capacity and experience of the state and local government and the amount of early resources makes a significant difference. And I think, Mr. Sprayberry, your experience in North Carolina would reinforce that. How can we help HUD work with local communities to build up technical capacity for these disasters? And I would think, authorizing this legislation would give HUD an incentive and need legal authority to do so. But Mr. Martin, your comments first.
Correct. So there are two benefits of permanent authorization for that specific issue about state and local capacity. And one is having clarity of rules in eligible activities. Everything becomes less of a appropriation-based directive and understanding the just predictability of what the program is going to be expecting. So that's number one. The second is actual technical assistance offerings can then be standardized, and the jurisdictions can be trained on how to prepare, how to roll out their programs more quickly. I mean, the biggest challenge, particularly for housing recovery, has been in these are block grants, and so let's be clear about the issue of federalization is that the state and local governments get to decide how to use the money within statutory requirements. So there's always been a goal of being able to sort of roll out packages as quickly as possible so that you don't have that time gap between the early assistance that occurs and the later CDBGR funding. So having clarity around what those programs are going to be allows technical assistance providers to be that much more clear and specific and help those programs launch more quickly.
Your comments, Mr. Fairbury, please.
Yes, sir. And I agree with Dr. Martin that, the predictability is going to allow HUD to build those technical assistance teams that we rely on so heavily and have relied on here in North Carolina. As part of this bill, it will create an Office of Disaster Management and Resiliency within HUD, which I think is just going to even increase more standardization of how they deploy the program. So I think that this legislation is actually going to enhance the efficiency. And I know I heard earlier about maybe some issues in the past. I can tell you that in North Carolina, we are constantly audited, not just by HUD, but also by the state auditor, and to make sure that we're staying within the rails and that we're looking at all of the eligibility criteria to make sure that everything is dress right dress. So I believe that this type of legislation is only going to enhance that and making sure that everybody is staying, within the criteria, the eligibility criteria, and getting the funding out to those disaster survivors who need it so badly.
Thank you. One of the issues, one of the existential issues that we face is climate change. And in the old days, you could simply go back and build what you had and, pat yourself on the back. Now we have to prepare for a future in which climate risk is going up. We have to respond differently. And a similar question, how can this proposal help us ensure that local communities are not just building the same thing, but building for the future? Mr. Sprayberry?
Well, this legislation requires that the funding that is spent by the local jurisdictions is spent so that it meets those requirements and that you are, in fact, building back in a resilient way. That's a requirement. It also allows for up to 30% funding plus up for activities that reduce repetitive loss. HUD's already started to move in this direction by providing CDBG mitigation. And so I think that you can see where, this legislation incorporates all of that together.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Martin, a quick comment. I think I can't see the clock, so I'm imposing, I'm sure.
Continue, Senator Reed.
Mr. Martin, your comments.
That's completely correct. The because HUD has a specific role in the recovery framework to be a bridge to long-term community planning and long-term community development, there is an awareness of where the high exposed areas are, who the most vulnerable communities are, and that's the only way you're going to be able to plan for long-term adaptation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.